I just have another matter, Mr. Commissioner, later this morning. Good morning, Ms. Leach. My name is Paul Champ. I'm lawyer for the Ottawa Coalition of Residents and Businesses, and I have some questions for you concerning your testimony yesterday. Now, I want to start with something, Ms. Leach, that I think we both agree on. You're not a national security threat in any way.
I don't believe I am, no.
And I also want to make sure that we're clear on the record. As you know, I've been able to see a lot of the financial information and so forth, and other proceedings and so forth. And you did everything you could to keep track of that money and deal with it responsibly, the money that was going through your hands.
Absolutely, yes, sir.
And in no way did you ever divert any of that money towards yourself improperly. No. And I'm saying that that's what I've seen. You've dealt very responsibly in every way you could with the money.
Yes, sir.
And you also testified yesterday you wanted to come to Ottawa for the right reasons. And by that, I mean you wanted to organize with other people, bring people together over that issue that was important to you, and send a message to the government and to your fellow Canadians. That's what you wanted to do in coming to Ottawa?
Yes, sir.
And you testified yesterday that you originally thought you wanted to drive across Canada, stand in front of Parliament with some signs, and you thought that's what the protest would be. Is that right?
Yes, essentially. I had no idea that it was going to become what it evolved into, yes.
For sure. But then once the enormous amounts of money started flowing in through GoFundMe, and people were energized around that, it opened up other options of what this protest could look like. Is that fair?
I believe that everyone that was involved and that joined was in it to be listened to, have their voices heard as far as the mandates and the restrictions and the lockdowns went.
But it made other things possible, like we were able to get the stages and the sound system and the resources to cover fuel and so forth for a much longer period than you had originally anticipated, correct?
That the donations that came into GoFundMe, as we specified in the description, was for fuel to get them to Ottawa and home.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So, but once you had a lot more, that opened up options that you could keep getting fuel to the trucks for a while they were here. That was part of the idea.
I guess that's fair.
And we saw I've read a news story about some texts that you had with Mr. Barber.
Yes.
I presume you're aware of the news story and those texts?
Yes, I am.
And in those texts, it's my understanding that you had some exchanges with Mr. Barber on or about January 30th about a strategy meeting at the command center about gridlocking Ottawa. Can you tell us about that?
Well, I can tell you what I remember, which obviously isn't much. Gridlock is not a term that I would normally use. So, and as the text message clearly states, that was not up to me. That was never something that we advocated for.
Sure.
So, and you have to understand that there was lots of times where we would have meetings, but we'd go in there and have a meeting about something totally different.
Right. But there was a talk about that, is that should be the strategy going forward, is keeping the trucks in the streets, gridlocking downtown. That was part of the strategy at that point.
No, we never wanted to gridlock the city. It was always, as I said, especially as we saw the momentum growing and the support that we were getting, safety became our #1 priority. And as you heard Mr. Marazzo testify, that was especially important to him, having a son that made frequent ambulance trips to the hospital.
Right. Unfortunately, we heard that he didn't necessarily know about all the streets. He didn't know about Kent Street, for example, which even Mr. Barber acknowledged was shut down the whole time. But you didn't have any visibility into that. That wasn't part of your responsibility,
No.
I gather. Okay. Now, I want to ask you some questions about the horns. You testified yesterday that at some point, even for you, the horns became a bit too much. You couldn't even carry on a conversation on the sidewalk when all those trucks were blaring that.
At times, yes.
Yeah. And I think I'd seen a video once where you're talking about when all the semi trucks, when they blow their horns, it's just crazy. That was the experience, was it not?
Well, I think that's taken out of context. Are you referring to the video that I made?
Yes.
Yeah, and I believe I said it was music to my ears. That was within a couple of days of getting there, and there was a lot of excitement, and it was a very jovial atmosphere.
But Ms. Leach, I know you strike me as a very reasonable person. You would agree with me that having a big rig, a semi-truck idling right in front of your house 24 hours a day, emitting diesel fumes, honking horns, prolonged periods during all day, sometimes at night, that's not reasonable to a person that lives there. Would you agree?
As I said yesterday, when I was in my hotel room, I didn't really notice it, the horns honking. And I was right downtown.
But you wouldn't want a big rig to pull up, for example, in front of your parents' home and park and idle for 24 hours a day for several weeks honking their horn. You wouldn't want that, would you, Ms. Leach?
Well, Mr. Champ, my ex-husband was a tool push on a drilling rig, and I've spent many days on the site of a drilling rig, and there's a lot of diesel fumes and there's a lot of noise.
Yeah, it's not pleasant, is it?
It is what it is.
Yeah, but then you get to go home and you get to get away from that noise and those diesel fumes, right?
Not when you're living on site, no.
Now, I want to ask you some questions about the injunction. On February 4th to the 5th, you heard about that there was a motion from the residents of Ottawa to get an injunction to stop the horn honking, correct?
Yes.
And we heard from Mr. Wilson a bit about that there was a meeting of the board or the leadership group about what to do, and there was a decision to oppose the injunction, correct?
I've never opposed the injunction.
Well, you swore an affidavit to oppose the injunction, Ms. Leach. Let's be clear on that, right?
Well, once it was imposed, of course, we weren't going to go against the injunction.
Well, no, there was a court hearing on Monday, February the 7th, where Mr. Wilson represented you and Mr. Barber and Mr. Dichter, who were named individuals on it, to oppose the injunction. You weren't aware that that's what the position you were taking?
I don't recall that, but if you say so, then.
And you swore an affidavit in support of that position, which I should say, swore an affidavit that the injunction should not be granted.
If you say so, I've sworn a lot of affidavits, so if you say so.
Is it fair to say there was a lot going on?
There was a lot going on.
It was hard to follow all the different things that were happening.
Yes.
And you may not have known exactly what the team was doing on some of those issues.
I guess that's fair to say.
Okay. Now, Mr. Wilson told us yesterday that on the board there were some who, there was a bit of division on the board. Some felt that, yeah, the horns are a bit too much. Maybe we shouldn't oppose this injunction. And some were like, no, we should oppose it. Do you recall that meeting?
I was probably there, but as I said, I was in and out of a lot of meetings, so I don't recall that specifically.
Okay. And you testified yesterday that once the injunction was issued, you worked very hard or worked really hard to see that it was adhered to. You recall your testimony on that?
Yeah, the truck captains did for sure, yes.
Right. But you yourself, you didn't do anything directly to ensure that the order was adhered to, did you?
I don't believe I did, no.
No, you didn't post any videos or make any statements on your social media account attempting to discourage the truckers from blowing their horns?
My Facebook page was deleted about the first week we were here.
But you didn't put up anything on it before it was deleted?
No, I did not, no.
And you never posted a copy of the court's injunction order or the terms of it in any way on any of your social media, correct?
I don't believe so, no.
And were you aware that that was a term of the court order, that you were supposed to do that?
I don't believe so.
Okay, so Mr. Wilson may not have communicated that to you.
He may have. Again, it was very chaotic times.
Now, February 4th, that's Friday. That was I'll give you the days because I'm sure it was like that.
It was a blur, yes.
I'm sure your days were crazier than mine, but I have a bit of a sense of what you were going through. Friday, February the 4th, that's the day that GoFundMe issued this statement saying they're shutting down the fundraiser, and they were going to return all the money to the donors. You recall that day?
I do.
And when GoFundMe shut you down, you lost what was potentially access to $10 million, correct?
Correct.
And GoFundMe put out a statement that day saying, quote, this previously peaceful demonstration has become an occupation. Do you recall that?
I do.
And by that point, you had also, I gather, been following some of the news stories, some of the reporting talking about the negative impact that the protest was having on residents, caused by the blocking streets and the honking. Were you following that?
I didn't have a lot of time to read the news, to tell you the truth.
And on that Friday, February 4th, after GoFundMe took away that $10 million, you learned later that day that you were being sued for $10 million. Is that right?
It was probably around that same time, yes.
So that was a bit of a rotten day, losing $10 million, being sued for $10 million.
You could say that, I guess, yes.
Now, did you consider or talk about with anyone else maybe working on an exit strategy at that point?
We had been in talks about that shortly after the legal team arrived, actually.
And after that one day when GoFundMe shuts you down, did you, would that have been a time for you to start thinking about shutting down the protest or coming up with saying, hey guys, we sent our message and going home? Was that ever part of the discussion?
Not to my knowledge. As I said yesterday, we were waiting to be acknowledged by somebody in the federal government who was willing to come and listen to what we had to say.
Right. But you told us yesterday also another factor is that the lawyers from the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, they had showed up and they were giving you good advice. They were supporting you by that point. Is that right?
Yes, yes, sir.
They'd been there a day or two by that time?
Yes, sir.
And is it fair to say that without them, you might have considered packing it in?
I don't know. That's really hard to say.
So on the Friday, February the 4th, GoFundMe shuts you down. You're sued for $10 million. Then on the Sunday, February the 6th, the city of Ottawa declared a state of emergency. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And then the next day, on Monday the 7th, the court issued the Horn injunction. So did you start thinking then, or was there any discussions then about maybe the protests should start packing it in?
There might have been. I know, again, to reiterate, we were very focused on being heard and having our concerns listened to.
And then on February the 11th, Premier Ford in Ontario, they declared a state of emergency about what was happening in Ottawa. You recall that?
Not specifically the date, but I do recall that happening, yes.
Weren't you getting the message? You testified yesterday, Ms. Leach, that, well, no one told you to leave. The police weren't telling you to leave. All of these things, the Premier, the Mayor, the courts, GoFundMe, that wasn't a message. The city of Ottawa, residents suing, that wasn't a message that maybe it was time to leave?
Well, we had a message too.
Yeah. And so, and that was more important than what the people of Ottawa were
After the stories that I
experiencing?
heard coming across Canada that were absolutely heartbreaking after 2 years of lockdowns and restrictions, yeah.
Now, you reached the deal with the mayor around Sunday the 12th, I believe.
Yes.
Or the 13th. No, the 13th.
13th, I think,
Something
yeah.
like that, that's right. And the Freedom Convoy put out a statement about the deal. You recall that?
Yes, I do.
And in the statement, you said things like you never wanted to impact the residents of downtown Ottawa.
That is correct.
And you wanted to agree to the deal to relieve the pressure on the people in downtown Ottawa.
Absolutely, sir.
Right, because there had been pressure on the people of downtown Ottawa by that point.
Well, as I said, we didn't want to create a big disruption to them. We wanted to be respectful to the citizens of Ottawa, for sure.
Because from January 29th till February the 13th, you recognize it wasn't very respectful to the people of downtown Ottawa.
Well, what I will say is that I was approached by hundreds of Ottawa citizens who had come out to support. I was approached by federal government employees who were donating items to the protesters. We had a lot of support in Ottawa from the Ottawa citizens.
Except for those that were suing you, I guess.
I guess, yeah.
And the mayor, who was elected by the citizens of Ottawa, he apparently wasn't supportive of you staying in downtown.
He wasn't, and I give him great credit for being willing to sit and talk to us.
Yeah, and let's just be clear here, Ms. Leach. No one was asking you to leave completely. It was about moving the trucks and having the truck stock idling out in front of residences and blowing the horns all night and day. That was the big message, wasn't it?
Yes.
Now, you testified yesterday that once the Emergencies Act was issued, and it looks like there was going to be action, law enforcement moving in, you testified that you encouraged people to leave. Is that right?
That's correct.
But you didn't do that on social media in any way, correct?
I did not.
So it was just people who you saw face to face, you were telling them to leave?
Yes, primarily our people from our team also.
You didn't think maybe it would be better, you had so much influence on people who were here in Ottawa protesting, that you should put it out on social media that, hey, you guys, maybe it's time for us to leave?
Obviously I didn't.
Well, and obviously another thing that you did, Ms. Leach, is, from my understanding, your testimony yesterday, you suspected you were about to be arrested, and you went out to the street to ask the police officers, or have someone ask the police officers if they were looking for you, right?
Yes, that's true.
And you went out with someone who could record the arrest when it occurred, right?
Everybody has a cell phone these days.
For sure. And when you were arrested, I didn't hear Commission Counsel ask you this, but as you were being arrested, you were yelling, "Hold the line," correct?
Yes. Well, one of the road captains that I was with said it, and I repeated it back to him, yes.
Right. And by that statement, I take it you weren't encouraging the other protesters to leave Ottawa, were you? You were encouraging them to stay, to hold the line, correct?
Well, you know, that's a matter of perspective. My perspective on hold the line means stay true to your values in the face of diversity.
Right. But you'd agree with me, Ms. Leach, that some people who were protesting, who were following you at that time, when they saw that message, they would have interpreted it to hold the line, to stay. Hold the line, don't leave Ottawa. Some might have interpreted it that way. Would you agree?
I can't speak for what other people think.
You don't think that's well, when you speak and you've got that kind of a platform, you recognize that people are listening to you, you have a great deal of influence on those people?
Well, again, it comes down to how you define the term, I suppose.
So just assist me with this, Ms. Leach. I'm trying to reconcile when you're telling us that you were encouraging people to leave, but you didn't put anything out on social media, but then you were with only one or two people at the time you were arrested, someone that you knew who recorded that video, don't you?
I do, yes.
Yeah, you know that person personally.
I do, yeah.
Yeah, and so they recorded it. You were aware, you saw them recording, right?
Yes, I did.
And then you yell out, "Hold the line," because you wanted the people to stay in downtown Ottawa. Is that right?
Again, I was repeating what one of the road captains had said to me.
Okay. Ms. Leach, just one last point. For reasons that remain utterly unclear to me, Commission Counsel asked you yesterday about the impact of your arrest and your charges against you. And I just want to make clear, you weren't charged with an offense under the Emergencies Act, were you? It's my understanding you've been charged under the Criminal Code.
I believe so, yes, all under the Criminal Code.
Right, you were charged in the Criminal Code for mischief and charged for interference with lawful use and enjoyment, both under the Criminal Code. Is that right?
Mischief, counseling mischief, intimidation, counseling intimidation, and a few more.
Right, but no offense under the Emergencies Act.
No.
And the indictment talks about activities from February the 7th up till February, I think, 19th, or the date that you were arrested. Is that right?
Perhaps.
Or the start of the date is before the invocation of the Emergencies Act, right?
I'm not sure.
Thank you, Ms. Leach.
Thank you, Mr. Tiant.
Okay, next is the Government of Canada.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good morning, Ms. Leach.
Good morning.
I'm Andrea Gonsalves. I'm one of the lawyers for the Government of Canada. You've told us in your evidence that you were not one of the founders of the Freedom Convoy, but you became involved because you wanted to help.
Yes, ma'am.
And primarily your role was fundraising, and you were quite successful with that, right?
Yes,
You told us you're not a trucker, you don't have a truck.
I do not.
And in the time you spent in Ottawa, there were obviously protesters, truckers who were sleeping in their trucks.
I believe so, yes.
But you didn't, you were staying in the hotels, right?
I was, yes. I didn't have a truck here to sleep in.
Right. And during that time, you've told us it was incredibly busy and surely exhausting for you.
Very much so.
Lots going on. You said you were in and out of different meetings, briefings, on various calls. You were dealing with the crowdfunding platforms, switching campaigns, for instance.
Yes, ma'am.
You were dealing with the funds being frozen, setting up bank accounts. That all took a lot of your time.
It did take some time, yes.
Setting up the finance committee and the various administrative aspects that went along with that also took portions of your time.
Yes.
And you were, through all of this, you've told us, constantly meeting new people. There were new people arriving all the time that wanted to meet with you.
Yes, there was, yes.
Yeah, lawyers, advisors, accountants.
Canadians.
Mr. Wilson, the other JCCF people, Mr. Eros, were just some of the names you gave us, right?
Yes.
And you said this was a lot of pressure for you. You felt pulled in different directions.
Yeah, there was times when it was definitely very chaotic and very crazy.
And you participated in many of the press conferences. You were getting put in front of cameras.
Yes, ma'am.
People were putting you forward as the leader. Mr. Wilson, you'll recall, describing you as the spark that lit the fire.
I do recall that, yes.
And you also said you felt at times people didn't see you, they just saw the money.
Yeah, there was times when I felt that way.
And all of these dealings were consuming a vast amount of your time during the days and weeks you spent in Ottawa.
Yes, yes, there was.
You, I gather, in all of this, couldn't leave your hotel very often.
In the beginning, in the early days, no. But as the days wore on, I was able to get out and to the crowds more.
Yeah, and occasionally-
and get out and talk to the truckers and stuff like that also.
Occasionally you spoke up on Parliament Hill.
I did, yes.
And you understand that the protest occupied quite a large physical, geographic area of Ottawa.
Yes.
Yeah, Wellington right out to SJAM.
Yes.
We've heard Parliament south as far as Somerset.
I'll take your word for it. I don't know the
Don't know the
streets here that
very
well yet.
Sure enough, and the evidence is in the record. You've heard there was trucks parked in the streets by the market in the Rideau and Sussex area.
Yes, yes.
For a period of time in the early days anyway, they were out in Confederation Park. There was an encampment there.
Yes, I believe so.
And the one out in Coventry Road, the parking lot
Yes,
at the
ma'am.
stadium. As well as those that were a bit further out of town, 1500 Bronson Road. Were you aware of that one?
I'm not sure of the addresses, but there was some out of town, yes.
You said yesterday something about 88. That would be exit 88 off of the 417?
I think it's by Embrun.
Embrun.
Embrun, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe that's the one, yes.
Out in Armprior. You heard about Van Cleek Hill?
Yes.
Yeah. And you, with all the demands on your time, were not spending the vast majority of your time in any of those places, right? You just couldn't.
I visited them, but yeah, not as much as I wanted to.
Yeah. And I think I've seen you here throughout the hearing. You've been here almost daily.
Yes, ma'am.
And we've heard some evidence about some of the things that were going on in the protest crowds. I take it this was evidence you were hearing, information you were learning for the first time, like the threats to the mayor of Ottawa?
I didn't know he was receiving threats.
You didn't know that Chief Slowly had received death threats?
No.
You didn't know that Deputy Prime Minister Freeland had received
I learned of that the other day,
a couple
yes.
days ago, and the Prime Minister was receiving threats?
Did not know. I was also receiving death threats.
Were you also learning for the first time as you sat through this hearing about numerous weapons-related arrests in connection with these protests? Or did you know that at the time?
I did hear something about Coots, but again, I didn't follow those stories that closely. I was too busy here.
And weapons-related arrests in Ottawa?
As far as I know, there was no weapons related.
Okay, well, there's been some evidence about that, and if that's the case, that would be the first time you learned about that, too.
Yes, I don't recall hearing about weapons, no.
We've heard evidence about protesters surrounding police and bylaw officers who were trying to do their jobs. Is that something you knew was going on at the time?
No.
No. And this document was introduced into evidence yesterday by my friend, Mr. Diana, but no one spoke to it, so perhaps we'll pull it up. It's OPP 401819. It's a OPP intelligence report for February 14th. And if we could please scroll down to page 2. And just, sorry, the very first paragraph there. And February 14th, of course, that's a big day. That's the day that the Emergencies Act invocation was announced by the Prime Minister, right?
Yes.
And the first bullet point there says Ottawa Police Service identified an online video in which a driver at the blockade had made inflammatory statements referencing violence, such as using a truck as a weapon. The video also showed him displaying a protective vest, which he claimed would stop an armor-piercing round. He claimed that he brought it with him to protect himself, and that he had worn it at the blockade. OPP field officers have spoken with this male, and his truck has been positioned in front of Chateau Laurier since the beginning of the protest. And I take it that's new information for you as well?
That is new information for me, yes.
And you've testified in this commission that you had to believe everyone who was getting involved was doing so for the right reasons, that they were joining with the best of intentions. And these are at least some examples of people who maybe didn't have the best of intentions, right?
Correct, which is why I continually was online advocating for peace, to remain peaceful, to abide by the law, and to respect our law enforcement.
Right. And in the various press conferences and press releases that you were involved in and that were being put out in the name of the Freedom Convoy, the message was repeatedly being communicated that the convoy was here to stay in Ottawa until the mandates were lifted, right?
Yes.
As long as that took was the messaging.
Yes.
Yeah. And you testified both yesterday and in response to questions from Mr. Champ this morning about the deal that, the exchange of letters that you engaged in with Mayor Watson. And as I understand the broad strokes, he sent a letter to your team with the assistance of Mr. Wilson. You sent a letter back, or a letter was sent back in your name, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And let's pull up that letter. It's HRF 6045. While we're waiting, or it's there, but while we're waiting for that, why did the letter go in your name? Do you know?
I was president of the board of directors at that time.
Okay. And the letter that's written in your name, if we just go down to the, sorry, a little too far, third paragraph, starts, "We have made a plan." And you write, or the letter says, "We have made a plan to consolidate our protest efforts around Parliament Hill. We will be working hard over the next 24 hours to get buy-in from the truckers. We hope to start repositioning our trucks on Monday." And that's worded that way because at that point, the best that you could offer the mayor was efforts to get buy-in from the truckers, right?
Well, we needed to go out and speak to them and talk to them about what we thought was going to be a good idea, yes.
Right. And After these letters were released publicly, we heard from Mr. Dichter in his testimony, and I believe you testified that you knew at the time from him that he had received many reactions on social media from those who were unhappy with this deal, right?
Yes.
Yeah. You also were aware that Pat King had immediately put out his own messaging undermining this deal, right?
Yeah, yes.
And it was important to you, I take it, to make clear that what had been agreed to was nothing more than moving the trucks out of the residential neighborhoods, right?
It was a step one.
Yeah.
That's how I viewed it. It was progress. It was the more progress than we'd seen since we arrived.
You, at that time, would not have put your name on any letter that agreed to a meeting if it meant you had to force protesters to pack up, end their protest, and go home, right?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah. Maybe I'll do it a little differently. The understanding you had with Mayor Watson was that you were going to make best efforts to help get the trucks out of the residential neighborhoods.
Yes.
And then he would sit down with you for a meeting.
Yes.
You were not going to agree to a meeting if it meant you had to tell all those truckers, get out of Ottawa, end your protest, go home.
Sorry, can you repeat that again, please?
You did not, and you would not have agreed to a meeting with the mayor if the condition for that meeting was that you and other leaders would have to tell the protesters, get out of Ottawa, go home, end your protest.
Well, that would have been something that we would have had to talk about. That's a what if.
And when you messaged this deal, you remember Mr. Wilson drafted up the Freedom Manifest that was going to be used to help communicate to the truckers what exactly they were being asked to do and what the deal
Yes.
was with the mayor, right? And so let's pull that up. That's HRF 401285. This is a document you had reviewed and you agreed with at the
Yes.
time, right? And in the fourth paragraph, what you're communicating here is we have to stay in Ottawa for the long haul to reach our destination. Just like we do every day with our routing logistics, we have to plan for the road ahead.
Yes.
And that's what you and Freedom Corp were saying to explain the deal to the protesters, that going along with what was being asked, moving those trucks out of the residential core to other areas in Ottawa, was a step necessary to make sure you could continue your protest for the long haul, correct?
Yes, we definitely would have loved to have stayed and continued to protest peacefully.
Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Next is the Ottawa Police Service.
Good morning, Commissioner. Good morning, Ms. Leach. My name is David Michikowski. I'm a lawyer for the Ottawa Police.
Good morning.
You've been very clear in your evidence that it was your intent to plan a peaceful protest, correct?
Correct.
And that was very important to you as one of the organizers.
Yes.
And you did not plan to disrupt the lives of Ottawa residents or businesses.
No.
And you obviously, consistent with that, obviously didn't plan to break bylaws, honk your horns continuously, defecate on people's lawns, harass people, or block emergency lanes. That wasn't the plan, was it?
I did none of those things.
And it wasn't the plan, was it? as one of the organizers, you wouldn't have been in favor of condoning that kind of activity, would you?
No.
And because it wasn't your plan, and you, in fact, had a code of conduct, you wouldn't have expected the police to turn the convoy away when they came to Ottawa, would you?
No, they were excellent to deal with right from the start.
And if that had happened and none of the trucks were allowed in, we've heard from OPP witnesses that that likely at that point would not have deterred the convoy because some had driven from very far away. Is that fair?
If we would have been told that we couldn't have driven up here, I don't believe that we would have. We would have found alternative places, I guess.
I'm saying that if when you got here on the 28th and the 29th, the city was barricaded and you couldn't go anywhere, the OPP witness indicated that that wouldn't have turned the truckers away because they'd come pretty far for this.
I don't know how to even answer that question. I guess if there was barricades in place, how could we have done that?
And no one from the convoy organizers, to your knowledge, was on social media before the convoy encouraging antisocial behavior?
Not to my knowledge.
Right. And you've seen the Lawton book about the Freedom Convoy?
I have, yes.
And in his book, he says that the convoy organizers did not intend to be on residential streets.
Yes,
And you would agree with that?
I would agree with that.
But in fact, that is what happened.
There was some residential streets that had lots of trucks on them, yes, sir.
There were staging areas, but they were too far away from Parliament, and people wanted to be closer, correct?
A lot of them did want to be closer, but there was also trucks that were out there too in those locations, yes.
And you've been very clear in the affidavit you filed in court that there were truckers who came from all over.
Yes, sir.
And you indicated specifically in that affidavit, which is, we don't need to call it up, but for the record, it's JCF 0012 in paragraph 2 and 3, that you did not control the truckers. Those are your words.
Yes, no, we didn't. They're all human beings. I don't control anyone, sir. I open up a dialogue with them and listen.
You're agreeing with me.
I didn't control anyone.
I'm sorry?
I did not control anyone.
You didn't control the truckers.
No.
And Superintendent Drummond attended a meeting he's heard with some of your representatives on the 13th of February. That was after the date of your letter with the mayor. Those were on the 12th, correct?
The meeting, oh, yes, sorry, the initial meeting was, I believe, Friday. Yeah, and so, yes, correct.
Okay. And so the agreement with the mayor was reached on the 12th of February.
I believe so, the 12th.
And then we saw that there was a meeting on the 13th that I believe Mr. Wilson may have attended with the mayor's
Yes, I believe so.
office. And Superintendent Drummond records in his notes, and again, I'll give you the reference, but in the interest of time, I won't call it up, but it's OPS 14455 at page 47. The convoy organizers, the representatives at that meeting, explained that they did not control Rideau Sussex.
I wasn't at that meeting.
But you're aware that that was said
Yes.
at that, okay. And that your representatives also said they didn't control Coventry Road.
Yes.
And they also said they could not be certain if the truckers there would move.
That's correct, I believe, yep.
And even for those groups whom you did have some control or influence on, I guess influence, we've heard that truckers are pretty independent-minded people.
Yes, they are.
They can't be made to do what they don't want to do.
Yeah, I guess so.
And in addition to not controlling the truckers, you also did not have control, obviously, of the protesters on the street and whether they could block trucks moving, for instance.
We didn't have control, no, but we worked very hard and very diligently with the gentlemen and women that were down there to open up a dialogue and and assist them in opening up that intersection.
And in fact, we heard about a previous effort by Mr. Wilson and Ms. Chipiuk on February 10th at Rideau and Sussex, where police were going to move the barriers so trucks could move, but the crowd dynamics got in the way and the crowd stopped the trucks from moving because they didn't trust the police, correct?
I was down there also, yes.
You were there as well. And so you saw that and you agreed that that would be dangerous then.
I didn't feel like it was dangerous. There was a large crowd presence there, and I think they were feeling that they had been lied to by the police. There was a lot of mistrust there, and they were down there singing "O Canada" and chanting freedom.
And you agreed it would be dangerous to move the trucks in that scenario because the crowd swelled.
There was a lot of people there, yes, yes.
And we have heard that notice was given to the demonstrators in advance that they would have to leave. You heard that evidence?
Which what are you referring to?
You've heard quite a bit of that evidence that demonstrators were told to leave.
I've never been told to leave.
Oh, you didn't know that? Okay. You're familiar with the PLTs, correct?
I am now.
I'm going to show you some PLT logs. And you understand that the PLTs were a liaison with the protesters?
Excuse me, yes, sir.
And would communicate with them?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm going to call it up. I'm not going to start by taking you directly to it, but I will take you to a particular passage. The document is OPS 130-14053. And so while that's being called up, Ms. Leach, those are PLT logs as of February 25th. And I can take you through them in detail and show you, but in order to save some time, I'm going to attempt to summarize what they say on the issue of notice that was given to the truckers and protesters before the public order unit moved in to clear the intersection. And so what I see in those is on February, there were various zones in the city. And I see on February 16th, the PLTs attended SJAM and gave those present the letter and were told by protesters that the letter wasn't legal because it didn't have a signature. Sounds sort of similar to what you said, correct?
Sorry, just, excuse me a minute, yes.
If my friend could actually take the witness to the part in the document that states that so that we can see it. I don't know if that's what it says or not. I apologize.
I will take her to it where it's necessary. If she doesn't agree, that's fine. I don't wish to use my 15 minutes by going through the document in detail. If she can't agree, I will take her to portions of it.
Sure, let's do that. Take me to portions, please.
PLT say they attended SJAM and they were told by the truckers that it wasn't legal, that notice, and it wasn't significant. Do you know about that?
I wasn't there, sir.
Okay. Do you have any reason to deny that occurred, as noted in the PLT logs?
I have no reason to.
Okay. And understand from those logs that the next day, on February 17th, they attended again and delivered the message again. And they attended again on the 19th and delivered it again to those who remained. Any reason to deny that that occurred?
I was not there. As a matter of fact, by the 19th, I was already in jail.
Okay. And so you weren't on the 17th, were you?
I was arrested that day, yes.
Right. And I'm pretty confident, because you were one of the organizers, that the truckers were communicating with you and telling you what was happening.
From SJAM?
All over the city.
No, not necessarily.
And then in Zone 2, and this is on page 7 of the same document, Mr. Marazzo met the PLT on the 16th, and the message was delivered to him, and then it was delivered on Wellington Street, and the PLTs described hostile and screaming at the police, and the police then had to withdraw due to the hostility. Any reason to disagree with that?
I was not present there, sir.
Okay. Any reason to disagree with it?
Sir, with respect, my friend's asking a witness who has no knowledge of something whether or not she disagrees with a document of which she didn't draft, of which was drafted by the police, and then asking if there's any reason to disagree with something she has no knowledge of. That's not a question, sir, that's permissible. It's not relevant. This witness, while this was all going on, was in jail without any form of ability to access phones and texts, etc. It's not an appropriate line of questioning.
The witness can answer if she was aware of it or not. She wasn't. I think it's quite proper cross-examination.
I'm not sure it's very helpful in the sense that I'm not sure what you're getting at. She can neither confirm nor deny because she has no knowledge.
Right.
To say, has she any, the questions relating to whether she received communications about any of this may have some relevance, and she's answered that. So,
Well,
you can
I'll
go ahead,
move
but
on.
you're.
In my submission, it is highly relevant because the witness said that no notice was given. And I'm going to suggest to you, Ms. Leach, that the PLTs went to every single site and gave notice to everyone. And you're saying you didn't know that. Is that right?
If you say so.
Okay. I'm going to ask that we turn up OPS 12205, page 60. Yeah, just at the top where it says Swiss Hotel. I'm going to tell you something, and maybe you'll remember this, Ms. Leach. PLT Peace, Jim, and OPS PLT Meg attended Swiss Hotel and met with Leach and Bulford and O'Connor. Message was delivered and explained. All parties were upset, and Leach was crying in regards to how unfair she felt this action was. PLT advised them to depart and message this out to others. All parties were upset when it was explained that people who are helping logistics can also be charged and held accountable. All understood messaging. They do feel that this message will harden participants' resolve as they feel that it is a tactic of dictatorial government. Suggestion was made to have children leave the red zone. Seems pretty clear to me that you were given the message, right?
I was never told I needed to leave.
So the PLTs, that's fabricated.
I remember when they came in and we had the discussion, and I, as it says, became very upset. I believe I said something to the effect of, "I cannot believe that you're about to do this to your own people." We were there protesting peacefully, and the rest of that interaction, I was upset and I was crying, and I
Right.
don't recall the
You
rest
were
of it.
upset and you were crying because it was over and they told you to leave.
I was upset and I was crying because of what they were proposing to do to Canadian citizens.
And they told you to depart and they told you to message that to others.
I don't
Right.
recall them telling me to message that to others or that I needed to leave.
I'm sorry, you don't
It was
remember?
suggested.
It seems to me your memory is selective. When I take you to something that implicates you, you have no memory of it.
That's inflammatory, and if my friend wants to take the stand and become a witness and give opinions about credibility, that's fine, but that's not a proper question, sir.
I'll move on. You would agree, you've talked about the fact that you didn't know the truckers or control them, and you didn't police them.
I did not know.
You weren't surveilling them.
No,
You didn't know their past. You didn't have intelligence information about all of them.
I am not an intelligence expert now.
Right. And you would agree with me that there may be other individuals or organizations that would have more intelligence information about some of the protesters than you did.
Such as,
Would you agree with that?
could you ask me your question again, sir?
Yeah. I said you would agree with me that there may be other individuals or organizations that would have more intelligence information about some of the protesters than you did.
Yes.
And you would agree with me as well that you have no background or formal training in crowd dynamics and what can incite a crowd to take action,
I don't know.
or how to prevent a crowd from escalating or preventing violence.
No, I don't.
And so just two more areas, if I may just have 2 more minutes, Commissioner. HRF 401510. If I may have that document, Mr. Clerk, please. Is an email from Eva Chipyuk. Eva Chipyuk was one of the Convoy lawyers.
Yes, sir.
And so this is on February 15th. She indicates, and for some reason we have not been given the attachment, although we've been told that solicitor-client privilege was waived. But in the email it says, I've drafted something on the right to protest and have taken a very cautious approach because I don't exactly know what the emergencies orders are. But it's my understanding that they can limit the right to protest. And while that can be challenged in court, at the moment, people who do not comply may be arrested. I think if we're advising people, it's important to let them know all the risks they're facing and let them make their own decision. You've seen that from one of your lawyers?
I've seen it since in these hearings.
So 2 possibilities. Either your lawyers didn't give that advice to you, or they did give that advice to you.
Sir, there's individuals CC'd or that emails too. She's not in it. And then the next day, or just in 2 days, she's not, you should first ask her if she got the email. God, sorry.
I'm sorry, my friend will have a chance to examine. This is quite proper cross-examination.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful to know if she received the email before you question her on it.
Okay, I will get to that, but there's a reason why I'm asking it in the way I have.
Okay.
So 2 possibilities. Either your lawyer didn't give you that advice, or you did get that advice from someone.
I did not receive this email, and I don't recall. As I said, there was a lot of chaos. We had a lot of conversations. I can't recall.
Okay, so you don't recall whether your lawyer gave you that email or not?
I don't believe I've seen it before.
Okay. And I understand that you've been charged with several criminal code offenses, correct? Mischief, obstructing justice, counseling others to commit mischief, intimidation, correct?
That's correct.
And I understand, you understand that the purpose of this inquiry is not to determine your guilt or innocence, correct?
Of course not.
And you've received disclosure of documents from the Crown, or partial disclosure, I believe you said?
Yes, I have.
And you understand, because the criminal process is ongoing, there's a principle, a case called WAG. And so as a result of that, you understand that I am not allowed to rely on documents that are part of the criminal brief, the Crown brief in this proceeding. You understand that, correct?
If you say so. Again, this is a new world to me.
And so you understand that if that's the case, I may not be able to challenge some of the statements you've said.
Sir,
correct?
my friend's arguing a
don't-
principle of law.
I am not familiar with this system, so
Okay. If I may just ask one final question then. You talked about concerns for safety, correct?
yes,
And that would include concerns for officer safety.
absolutely.
And so we've heard evidence of police officers being swarmed by protesters. And I assume that you would be concerned about that.
I never witnessed that, but I would be concerned.
Right. But you don't have sufficient control over the truckers or the protesters to prevent that if that's occurring,
I
correct?
don't control anyone, sir.
Thank you very much for
Thank you.
answering my questions.
Thank you. Next is counsel for former Chief Slowly.
Sure, Ms. Leach, Tom Curry for former Chief Slowly.
Good morning,
I
Mr.
just have a
Curry.
few questions.
Yes, sir.
Can I just show you the one thing that my friend for the Ottawa Police Service was speaking to you about, just so that you have the full picture.
Yes, sir.
Could I ask, please, Mr. Registrar, for the witness to be shown HRF 401520. I think this is the attachment that was referred to. Just in case this helps your recollection, what is being projected now is a document with the title, The Right to Protest. And have you seen it? I appreciate you're going to take a second to look at it, but just let us know, please, if you have seen that memorandum before.
I don't recall seeing this attachment, no, sir.
Okay. And I gather from the record that it is the attachment to which Ms. Chipiuk's email, or that was along with Ms. Chipiuk's email, and refers to the limits of the right to protest that were expressed in that cover. But that's not something that you saw or heard of.
I don't believe so, no. It does not look familiar.
Thank you. Just a couple of things, and if I could, the Commissioner, one of the things that the Commissioner has to consider is recommendations about dealing with the Emergencies Act and presumably perhaps even the right to protest and some of the limits that we've heard about. Could I just have a couple of additional facts from you? You and Mr. Barber met, I think you told us, on the 24th of January to begin the trip
Yes, that is correct.
here,
Yes.
and you left from Redcliffe.
Redcliffe, Alberta, yes.
And arriving in Arnprior the 29th.
We got into Arnprior the evening of the 28th, I believe, the Friday evening. I believe that was the 28th.
28th, Ottawa the 29th.
Yes, sir.
And what I'm interested in knowing is, of course, first of all, the numbers of protesters exceeded your expectations. Is that fair?
Yes.
Wildly exceeded?
Yes.
And I think you told us that you imagined that you might be able to raise $20,000 for this convoy, and of course the financial commitments that you garnered were far in excess of that. But then in terms of the numbers of protesters who you considered, and I presume Mr. Barber considered in his conversations with you, were not in the numbers that filled up the streets of Ottawa in the way that you found them on the 29th. Is that fair?
Oh, sorry, could you repeat that?
Sure. Your expectation when you got to Ottawa, you saw far more people than you believed would be in attendance.
Yes.
And am I right that you were not the person primarily or even at all communicating with police about how many people were going to attend?
I don't believe so. I know the road captains were in constant communication with law enforcement, though.
Got it. And insofar as you know, the road captains would have had some information about the numbers of members of their individual convoys that they had, but they would not have had a picture of the entirety of it because people were coming from far and wide. Is that fair?
We tried every day to get solid numbers, and like with people joining and leaving, you know, some people would travel with us for 200 kilometers. Some people would travel across the province and turn around. It was very challenging, and as much as we tried to count, it was next to impossible.
So much so that when you got here, as much as you tried to understand how many would be there, you missed the mark.
Yes.
Now, then, just a couple of other things. In terms of the company, the not-for-profit, it was incorporated January 30th, I understand?
I think it was the 30th or the 31st, but it was right around there, yes, sir.
And then I think in the record, the bylaws that organize it were prepared by February 3rd. So that was the company and the governance model that you had imposed was evolving only once you got here.
Yes. Yes.
Then finally, in terms of the description, I mean, you and Mr. Wilson have both called the scene chaotic. Can you tell the Commissioner, when did you first appreciate the sense of chaos that you have described? Was it when you arrived on the 29th?
It was sitting on my kitchen table when we were organizing, and because I had messages coming in and emails coming in and phone calls, and it was very busy times.
Right.
Very busy times.
And so by the time you got here and saw the situation in Ottawa, was it chaotic at that time as well?
There were times when it was chaotic. As you referred to, there was a lot of people here. When we got into town, I just saw a lot of smiles and a lot of flags and people hugging each other. But there was, yeah, so I don't necessarily mean chaotic all the time as a negative term, but it was, a mixture of both.
Understood. Just one last thing. I think one of the questions that you were asked about what would have happened as you approached Ottawa if the city had been, I think the language was blocked or barricaded. Having regard to the numbers of people coming far and wide and your inability to control them, is the likelihood that those convoy protesters would have just made their protest where the blockades were?
Again, that's kind of a what-if question that I can't really speak to. I don't know.
Right, fair enough. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Next is the City of Ottawa.
Alyssa Tompkins for the city. The city has no questions for this witness.
Thank you. Ontario Provincial Police.
Good morning, Commissioner. The OPP have no questions. Thank you.
Democracy Fund, JCCF, Citizens for Freedom.
Morning, Mr. Commissioner, Ms. Litch.
Good
My name's
morning.
Antoine Dailly, Council to Citizens for Freedom, representing peaceful protesters in Windsor. Ms. Litch, in yesterday's testimony, you indicated that at the beginning you were tasked with some of the fundraising and that you thought that a fundraising goal of $200,000 was way too much and that you expected maybe $20,000 in donations. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that you certainly did not expect the level of financial support that the convoy did receive over that period of time. Is that correct?
I think we were all quite shocked about that, yes.
Perfect. Do you agree that many Canadians who were unable or otherwise unwilling to go out and protest in the streets instead donated to the convoy as a tangible demonstration of their opposition to the government mandates?
I do, and I remember saying, I think it was maybe to Mr. Wilson, that it wasn't even about the money, it was about the statement behind the money.
Right. And so is it also your understanding that contributors to a GoFundMe campaign may leave a message of support when they donate?
Yes,
And did you review some of those statements of support?
very briefly, I did scroll through some, yes.
But so then, based on your experience, would it be fair then to characterize the act of donating to the convoy's fundraising efforts as a form of political expression?
I would. And encouragement and support. I think as it grew, people wanted to be a part of it in any way that they could show support. And that was one way that people that couldn't attend or be on an overpass or drive to the side of the highway were able to support.
Understood. And is it true that the GoFundMe campaign for the convoy was active for less than a month?
Yes, it was.
And were you ever made aware that the convoy's fundraising campaign in that limited amount of time enjoyed more donations from more Canadians than the Liberal Party of Canada did in either 2020 or 2021?
I believe somebody had mentioned that.
So we're
Yes.
talking about large amounts of money
Yes.
here, right?
Yes.
And are you aware of any other grassroots fundraising campaign which has raised comparable amounts of money since March of 2022?
Not to my knowledge, but I haven't also looked any up.
Fair enough.
Yes.
And lastly, we heard about some of the conditions and restrictions that you are now subject to while you wait for your trial next year. In addition to those conditions, how many days have you spent in jail since you started fundraising for the convoy?
49 days in total.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now for the convoy organizers.
Sir, I'm wondering if we can take the morning break a little early. I have to talk to 3 separate lawyers behind me about certain areas of examination. If we could take the morning break, I'd be very much appreciative.
Only if you make the commitment to have a focused questioning so that it's useful use of the break.
Absolutely, sir.
Okay, well, we'll take the break early then. Take 15 minutes, please.
The commission is in recess for 15 minutes. La commission est levée pour 15 minutes. The commission is reconvened. La commission reprend.
Okay. The convoy organizers.
Good morning. For the record, Brendan Miller, appearing as counsel for Freedom Corp, and I think you know who I am as I'm your lawyer.
Good morning.
So I just want to start out with some just general question. At any time during the protest, had you been given a court order injunction to move the trucks or leave or what have you, what would you have done and how would you have acted?
I would have obviously followed the injunction. I never intended or came here to break the law. I would have asked if there was a way that we could remain, if there was anything that we could work out so that we could remain and continue our protest.
Okay. And you heard yesterday the evidence from Mr. Dichter, did you not?
I heard some of it, yes.
Right. And he testified about not knowing about the deal that the Convoy Corp or Freedom Corp and the board were going to enter into with the city. Do you have any comment about that?
I believe he was obviously not able to attend because he was in a cast, but I believe we had dialed him in on the phone to be present at that meeting.
Right. And so at that meeting, what was discussed?
I believe that was the deal with the mayor.
Okay. And what, if any, board members objected to the dealings with the mayor?
I don't recall anybody objecting to it.
Yeah. And you heard him give evidence that the board members were scared of the lawyers and what they were dealing with. Do you have any comment in that respect?
That was news to me.
Okay. Have any of the other board members expressed such a fear to you?
No.
Okay. Thank you. My friend, Mr. Champ, discussed with you at length the injunction, when you should have known you should leave. And though I haven't given notice of this, I'd like to bring up document HRF 073, which is the injunction order from February 7th. And if we could just scroll down to the terms. Right. And so if I can just direct you to paragraph 7 of the injunction. Can you read that?
Yes, sir.
And what's your understanding of the injunction in this order at the time when it was obtained?
My understanding was that so long as we remained peaceful and complied with the order, we were permitted to stay.
Right. And then there was a subsequent order, and I understand that term, which states that provided the terms are complied with, the defendants or other persons remain at liberty to engage in peaceful, lawful, and safe protest. I take it that that term was in that order too. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear all that, sorry.
I apologize, I'll speak up. The term at term 7 there, where it says that it provided the terms of the order are complied with, the defendants and other persons remain at liberty to engage in peaceful, lawful, and safe protest. I take it that was in the following injunction order as well. Is that right?
I believe so, and I think that was February 16th, but I'm not sure.
Thank you. And so my friend with the Government of Canada discussed with you what your knowledge was of violent offenses, et cetera, that was going on in Ottawa at the time. If Mr. Register could bring up the document we just discussed, POE.HRF, a whole bunch of zeros, 2. If we could just rotate that. And so the coloring on this is gone, and this is already in evidence, but between the date of the beginning of the protest and the invocation of the Emergencies Act, there was a total of 4 violent offenses individuals were charged with in that time period. Did you know any of those individuals?
I did not.
Okay. Did you hear about individuals being charged with violent offenses?
Since the convoy.
Okay. And my friend had asked you questions about some of the statements that have been given in this proceeding as well as in the media about all these awful things that happen to people. And you've been here for this entire time. Have you heard from any witness that they, in fact, were the victim of an assault or witnessed an assault or anything violent?
The only thing that I've seen and heard was not violence on the behalf of protesters. It was the video footage that I saw when the crackdown came.
Could you agree that if there were victims of actual violence, given that they know who's charged, it would have been relatively easy for those witnesses to be procured to testify before this commission?
David Mitchell.
I withdraw.
For the
Withdraw.
Ottawa Police.
I withdraw. Now, I just want to talk with you about the letter and some of the reactions that you got from some of the protesters. Of course, we know that Mr. Dichter didn't appear to like the letter, and Mr. King didn't appear to like the letter. What was your general responses that you were getting at the time with respect to the letter and the deal that was going to be done through the city?
Well, I can't speak to other places. I know that we printed off that letter, and I went out to 88 and spoke with the gentleman that owned the property out there. And some of the truckers that were there, their response was very positive. I think that everyone felt that, as I stated earlier, this was a step one.
Okay. And again, what was the sort of responses, though, that you were getting on the street from some of the truckers after that deal was announced?
I don't remember.
Can you remember if was there some negative responses? Was there some positive responses that you personally witnessed?
I didn't witness any negative responses, no.
Okay. And I understand that Mr. Marazzo, as you sat through his testimony, he stated that the purpose of the meeting and the goal of Freedom Corp and its board was not really to get a deal with the mayor. It was a meeting with the mayor, but it was to get this deal to make things work peacefully. Can you elaborate on that?
Can you repeat that, please?
So the actual goal with respect to Freedom Corp as well as the protesters that you were representing, their actual goal was not to achieve a meeting with the mayor, but it was to deal with this in a peaceful manner. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes, well, that was obviously our goal, and again, to get the trucks off the residential streets. We were hoping to find a way that the trucks that did have to move their vehicles out of the city would be able to come back in and continue the protest. And again, we felt it was a step in the right direction, and meeting with the mayor was not one of my goals, but I thought, again, it was a way to open some dialogue with somebody in a position of authority.
Okay. And just on my last point here, part of this commission is about coming up with recommendations and things like that. I take it when you came into Ottawa, and we've heard evidence that a lot of the truckers were directed where to park, and that's where they kind of stayed throughout the proceeding or throughout the protest. And so there is this issue in what I refer to and what's referred to in some of the jurisprudence is a speaker's corner. Have you ever heard of that?
I don't think so.
Okay, it's a place, a location in a government area, particularly out front of Parliament or where have you, where protesters are permitted to go, and it's a designated area for protest.
Okay.
I take it when you were trying to get the protest moving, most of the protesters were wanting to get onto Wellington because it's in front of Parliament and they were protesting the federal government. Fair?
Correct.
All right. And what is your understanding of the current state of Wellington today?
I believe it's blocked off.
Right. And if that area that's blocked off became a speaker's corner, where individuals at any time could go and protest the federal government, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that would be a good idea. I think Canadians have a right to exercise their democratic rights, and they have a right to have their voices heard.
Right. And my friends from the Government of Canada put to you a whole bunch of evidence that you weren't familiar with until you got here with respect to threats. Can you elaborate on any of the threats you've received, ones that you know members of the protesters received, as well as the legal counsel, and even any of the legal counsel in this room since this proceeding started?
I know, well, I heard when I was at the ARC that the ARC was receiving death threats against me, which is one of the reasons why I left that location. I have messages on my phone from an Instagram account from a young man that wanted to not just shoot me, but also shoot the rest of the protesters or the convoy organizers. I know that my criminal lawyer has received some very nasty emails. I believe Mr. Wilson has received death threats and threatening emails.
Right. And so it's fair to say then that there has been a lot of threats on both sides.
That's fair.
Okay. But do you know anybody who's made death threats to any of these individuals?
Of course not.
And when you walk in here every day for the past few days, there's a protester outside, and I'm sure you've heard everything she's been saying, and she's a counter-protester and is against your cause. What are the sort of things that protester has said to you while you've been coming in and out of this hearing?
Well, it's been very hard to hear because there's a lot of construction. I just hear her shouting my name a lot. I heard her say something, I think just now, about she can't wait till I go back to jail. But other than that, I haven't really.
Did she mention anything about terrorism?
I believe that's right on her sign.
And what's it say?
It says, "Go home, terrorists."
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, any re-examination?
No, Mr. Commissioner.
Okay, I just have one question. You were taken to a chart and told there were charges for violent offenses.
Yes.
Do you know who was charged? Do you know the
With
four people?
violent offenses?
Yeah, the four
no,
people.
I know I don't. Not that I can recall anyways.
So you don't know if it's someone you know or someone you don't know?
I do not, sir.
Okay. Well, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, sir.
And you're now free to go.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so that, we move on to the next, which is the, I believe, the panel of two witnesses, and there's an issue to be discussed about as I understand it, the relevance of that.
Correct.
So maybe we'll deal with that now, if that's agreeable.
Sure, thank you very much. So I'll remain seated here, Commissioner.
That's fine. Just identify yourself, because it's the same. The reporters have to know who's speaking.
Sure, it's David Mijkowski, counsel for the Ottawa Police Service. We have a very real concern with respect to the witness panel of Chris Deering and Maggie Dingmer. I believe there is now a different name, and I apologize. It's Hope Braun, I believe. Those two individuals, and our concern is essentially one of procedural fairness. Those two individuals were not on the list of witnesses provided by the commission. And so last Friday...
You mean they weren't on the original list?
Correct. And what we found out was on last Friday, October 28th at 12:37 p.m., we received an email from the commission saying that these two individuals would be called as witnesses and attaching two statements from these individuals. No information had been previously provided about these individuals or about the issues that they were going to testify about, which are the how their arrest was handled, nor were there any documents provided by the parties, including the Ottawa Police Service, about the manner of arrest. It appears that both of these individuals, from their statements, are going to give evidence about the circumstances of their arrest by unknown officers. I've been able to determine in one case that it was not an OPS officer, one of them, but we are trying to find out information. These are arrests that took place on February 18th after the invocation of the Emergencies Act. These individuals were not arrested pursuant to the Emergencies Act. They were arrested based on common law powers and the criminal code. And my concerns really are twofold. Firstly, the information we say is not relevant to your mandate under the Act. And the second question is one of procedural fairness. There were over 275 arrests made by the police in that period of February 18th to the 20th. None of the police witnesses were asked specifically about those arrests. No documents were requested. The last police witness who testified in this proceeding was on Wednesday, October 26th. Had those witness statements been provided prior to the completion of the police witnesses, then at the very least we could have asked our witnesses to provide evidence with respect to the arrest plan, with respect to the circumstances of the arrest of those two individuals and the other 275 people who were arrested. I am not faulting Commission Counsel. I understand that the statements were provided to them and they provided them to us immediately after. But it was 2 days after the last witness testified. Those statements were in the those were witnesses who are here represented by counsel. They had an obligation to produce documents. They chose, deliberately or otherwise, to not present that evidence and not allow me then to respond to it. And it's obvious that some of that information they had beforehand. And in fact, to add to the procedural unfairness, last night we received an email from counsel for the Convoy organizers attaching 7 more videos that also would have existed that were not disclosed. There's no explanation for why the Convoy organizers have not had to follow the same rules as everyone else. Those statements, even if they were relevant, and I don't concede that they are, should have been provided prior to police witnesses testifying. it creates a serious and irreparable breach of procedural fairness to have you left with 2 arrests out of 275, which I am unable to provide evidence in response to, both those specific arrests as well as the arrest plan in general. And there are, I say, 2 possible solutions. The first is to not allow that evidence to be heard. It's not relevant to your mandate. And even if it was, it would be very difficult to draw any conclusion from the evidence of 2 individuals out of 275 arrests when you've heard no evidence about any of the arrests of anyone else or the arrest plans or any explanation of those 2 particular arrests. Alternatively, if you are inclined to allow that panel to testify, including adding new documents that were not on the database and were provided last night, then the OPS must, we say, as a matter of procedural fairness, be allowed the opportunity to call another witness to provide evidence about the arrest plans and the exercise of use of force options in connection with the exercise of police powers, generally and specifically with respect to the scene that the officers encountered on February 18th. You have not heard about what is involved when a public order unit has to exercise tactical options. The commission didn't lead this evidence, nor did we. Similarly, we didn't provide any documents surrounding those arrests. So while my first submission is that you should not allow this evidence, as an alternative, if you are inclined to do so, then I would ask for the opportunity to call evidence so that in fairness, the police witnesses can address what should have been put to them by the convoy organizers and which for some reason was not. Those are my only submissions. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Any other council wish to make submissions?
In response, sir.
Okay, I'm just canvassing first. So you'd like, yes?
Yes, Commissioner.
Okay. Go ahead.
Should I go ahead? Emily Tamman for the...
I take it you're supporting the proposal that, or the objection?
That's right. Yeah, we agree. Just on behalf of the Ottawa Coalition of Residents and Businesses, we share the view conveyed by the Ottawa Police. We understand that the Commission is working under difficult constraints, and there have been limitations in Council's ability to get documents and other evidence to the parties in a timely manner. But in this case, we would agree that there is prejudice and that the evidence, at least as it pertains to the arrests, should not be admitted.
Thank you. Any other?
Yes, Commissioner. Commissioner, it's Chris Diana for the OPP. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, the OPP agrees with the position of our friend, Mr. Michikowski, both the main position or the alternative position. At this point, we don't know if the OPP was involved or not in these incidents. And based on procedural fairness, we should that evidence either should not be permitted or we should have a chance to respond to it. I won't add anything further to the comments by my friend, but the OPP supports that position.
Okay. Any other submissions in support? Okay. And then, as I understand it, the convoy organizers are opposing?
We're of course in support of the witnesses testifying and all of the evidence being put before the commission. I'll deal first with the point of law my friend raises about relevance and materiality. With respect to the terms of reference under the order in council in this commission, this commission is to look at the efforts of police and other responders prior to and after the declaration. So with respect to whether or not there was police brutality or misconduct, et cetera, it's relevant and material within the terms of reference. Second, with respect to my friend's allegations of prejudice and it not being fair, with respect, they have not called a single victim or a single eyewitness to any of these purported violent crimes that they're trying to lay at the hands of the protesters as a collective. I don't see how our clients being able to find some witnesses of which they had no control of and which approached them in trying to be able to call actual evidence of actual violence that isn't just an assertion. And in my respectful view, it's relevant and material. If you find that there is some form of prejudice suffered, what my friend is essentially alleging is a violation of the rule of Brown and Dunn. If this was a court, that leaves the court with various remedies, and one is to permit the recalling of a witness in rebuttal. With respect to the rule of Brown and Dunn, I did put issues with respect to arrest, et cetera, directly to Chief Bell, who was in charge of the operation at the time, and acting and asking questions about what was actually done. We've now provided the videos of those actual arrests, and I understand that all the police agencies don't want that to be in the public eye. And with respect, I would submit that the public has a right to see these videos. It is in the public interest, and any prejudice is easily repairable by permitting my friends to call a rebuttal witness if they so choose. Subject to any questions, sir, those are my submissions.
Okay, and any other party is opposing the application?
Adam Pure for the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms.
Yes.
We support the Freedom Convoy organizers' position, and if I could just make a few points. So first, the terms of reference in the Emergencies Act do require investigating and looking into the appropriateness of the measures that were used. Interim Chief Bell testified that using emergency powers were used to create an exclusion zone, and then they relied on that authority. And so I would expect that these witnesses as arrestees would have evidence that would be relevant to the implementation of that authority. Also, to the extent that my friend made the point that these are but two arrestees of many, we did hear from two Ottawa residents who provided their experiences as examples, and that would then represent a broader class of individuals. So this would also be two arrestees providing their experiences, which would then be emblematic of others in a similar position. And I would just like to add on, my friend, Mr. Honor from the Democracy Fund, provided submissions through email. He's not here. I would just briefly read it in just to provide his perspective as well. The Democracy Fund submitted that the evidence of these witnesses is relevant to the Commission's mandate. Specifically, the Commissioner has been directed to examine issues to the extent relevant relating to the efforts of police and other responders prior to and after the declaration. Superintendent Robert Bernier and others testified about the mission statement contained in the OPS operational plan of February 13th, which speaks to enforcing legislation with the, quote, utmost respect to the individual's charter of rights, end quote. There was evidence before the Commission that this plan evolved after the declaration of the Emergencies Act, and there was also evidence that the OPS found the powers available to them under the Emergencies Act to be useful. The Commission should hear evidence from these witnesses, as it will speak to how police enforcement was carried out during the state of emergency from a protester perspective. If there are objections as to relevance as the evidence unfolds, those objections can be dealt with orally. If other witnesses need to be recalled, that decision can be made after the hearing of evidence from the witnesses in question. So that was Mr. Honor's submission, which the Justice Center also supports. Thank you.
Okay.
Commissioner,
Any other who are opposing or rather supporting the motion? Okay. Yes, Commissioner.
Mr. Commissioner, at some point, Commission Council would like to provide some points of context, but if you're still canvassing, we can wait until that's done.
Okay, you'd like to add something? Yes.
If I may, Commissioner, Emily Tamman again for the record. I just wanted to respond to one point made by my friends regarding the absence of evidence with respect to residents of Ottawa who experienced violence in the convoy. And for the record, would just like to note again that the Ottawa Coalition was very limited in the time that was allocated to tell the story of residents of Ottawa. I would also note that There are many residents who continue to fear for their safety in being identified publicly as opposing the convoy. And with that said, I don't think it's appropriate to infer from the lack of evidence on that point that it didn't happen. And I would also note in response to...
I think you're getting into argument now. We're dealing with whether or not there's relevance to the evidence that's being tendered.
That's right, but one of the bases upon which it's being asserted that it is relevant is that there's been no evidence in relation to violence experienced by residents. And that's something that my friend put to Ms. Leach this morning, and also Mr. Miller noted it in his submission to you just now.
Okay, yes, Mr. Michikowski.
David Michikowski for the Ottawa Police. The one point I want to respond to that has not with respect been addressed by my friends, and which is highly problematic, I suggest, is the convoy lawyer has indicated that he put an issue with respect to an arrest to Chief Bell. And that is correct. However, he provided no information, no details, no indication of who it was, when it was. It came out of the air. And what makes that more problematic is that obviously that information was in his possession and there was no documentation provided beforehand. This was sprung after the police witnesses had already testified when we then got these statements. Had the rules been followed, that witness would have seen those statements, would have seen documents. We would have had the opportunity to put in documents and call evidence or ask to call evidence in response. The final point I note is that one of my friends indicated that several of the convoy witness, or several of the coalition's witnesses testified, and that is true. The difference is the rules were followed, and everybody knew before they testified what they were going to say. So the convoy organizers had procedural fairness, as did everybody else. In this case, there is a serious denial of procedural fairness, and that's what we say must be addressed. Thank you.
Okay. And Commission Counsel, you wanted to provide some context, and among other things, I don't know what the witnesses are going to say, so to what degree is this one of the witnesses that we saw the video about, or is this something different?
So
maybe you go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut off my friend. This is not the witness. That one was also unfair, but we were at least able to get instructions and able to deal with it in cross-examination.
Okay, so that was a red herring then. Okay,
yeah, I have no objection.
I was worried that this was the same person.
No, I have no objection, by the way, for you reviewing those statements so that you can understand the nature of the evidence.
Okay. Commission Counsel.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. John Mather, Commission Counsel. Just 2 points of context. Again, we haven't heard the evidence yet, but Commission Counsel expect that while there may be some evidence given about the arrests, that's not the focus of the evidence. Don't expect it to be the focus of the evidence. The 2 individuals who are being called, Commission Counsel understands, participated in the protests both before and after the invocation of the Emergencies Act. They are not individuals, again, as we anticipate, who identify themselves as organizers. To date, the Commission has called individuals who have identified themselves as organizers, and this is a different perspective and one that we anticipate exploring. And then the second point, Mr. Commissioner, is that there has been evidence given by police witnesses about the measured responses in terms of ending the protests in the red zone in Ottawa. Some of these matters have been before the Commission and prior to today without objection.
Okay. Thank you. Any further submissions by anyone? I'm being very generous about submission time.
Just one more, sir, and I just want to emphasize,
But don't repeat, though.
I'm not going to repeat.
I always worry when someone says, I'm going to emphasize.
I'll take it back. I'm going to point out that, when it's with the commission under the Inquiry Act and its provincial equivalents, it is an inquiry, and it has different rules, and it's much more liberal when it comes to the permitting of evidence. And though I understand my friend's argument, there is many more remedies available for a breach of the rule of Brown and Dunn if you find that it had occurred than not permitting the evidence. And I would submit simply that the least intrusive remedy in the truth-seeking function of this commission would be to allow the evidence and on whatever terms you see just. Thank you.
Okay, just give me a moment. Okay, I'm going to allow the panels to go ahead. On Mr. Michkowski's first point about whether the information is relevant, I think there is certainly evidence that it may be, I haven't heard it, but it may be relevant as to the use of the Emergency Act, and in particular the notices that have apparently there's lots of evidence were circulated as recently as this morning. So the use of the notices, the setting up of exclusion zones is squarely within the mandate. And therefore, I think the information may well be relevant. I also note that there has been evidence of police as to the fact that the protest was ended in an orderly manner and quite properly. I believe Inspector Bowden talked about that. I believe another witness, maybe Chief Bell, talked about the fact it was ended without burning of police cars, etc. So the manner of ending is relevant, and this may go to some degree. I think and there was also cross-examination or in I believe of Inspector Bernier as to the arrangements that were made and the processing, how the processing was done. So there is evidence about how the operation, if you like, was carried out, including how the detainees were treated and the system arranged. Now, having said that, the impact and relevance diminishes to a point where it in fact becomes questionable as we get further from the use of the Emergency Act notice, et cetera, because this commission is not mandated to deal with arrests that were or were not done in accordance with the appropriate police procedures and so on. That's a matter for civil or criminal courts if there have been issues in that regard. So I think it moves quite, I would say, of marginal relevance, if any, to what the commission is doing when you talk about the actual manner of arrest as opposed to what I've described that is more squarely in the relevance. So having said that, I'm not prepared to accept that this panel is not relevant. I expect the accent will be on what I have set out is clearly relevant and what's related to that, and obviously there'll be some context. Context has been provided by other witnesses sometimes, and while I may hear that, it may not become an issue that I have to deal with. Now, on the second point, the procedural fairness point, I have some concern about that because obviously it is, as I've said many times, and I'm going to repeat it, the public wants to get to the bottom of this, and that means fair to all parties. And I am concerned that there may be unfairness to some of the parties, in particular the police forces, whether it be the OPP or the OPS, or in fact to former Chief Slowly or anyone else. So fairness is front and center in my concerns, and if after we hear this evidence there's a need to call further evidence, we've said we would sit evenings and we will sit Saturdays. We will get the information that the public needs to know, and that will lead to a fair treatment for all. But I guess that's my ruling. Now, if you want something more formal in writing, I'm happy to do it. But since the panel is here waiting, and we all want to make sure we fully use our Friday, I thought I'd give my ruling. Now, if any party wants it in writing and expanded upon, I'm happy to do that. But I think that sets out really my thinking in a general way. And with respect to whether we will have another panel or another witness, I think that's something we can deal with after the evidence is heard. With respect to the videos, I'm a bit concerned about the videos. I haven't seen them. And I would hope we're not going to get too far afield of what's relevant to the issues I need to deal with. And I don't mean to minimize any issues about how an arrest was carried out. Those are obviously significant to individuals involved, including the officers, but that's not central. In fact, is more anecdotal, I think, in terms of what this commission is dealing with. But it is part of the record so far, some of the evidence relating to that. So that's my ruling, and we can proceed with the panel, I believe, and I will expect the parties, if there are concerns about the ruling and you wish it in writing, please notify Commission Council. Well, it will be in writing because it'll be in the transcript, but expanded upon, I mean.